Okay, let us create the login API. We know that our application Post-it app uh, allows the user to register on the website, and once the user is registered, the user can log in. So the login API will receive the email and the password from the login form, and then this API should check whether this user exists or not. If the user exists and if the password is correct, then this API will send the user object back to the client. Else it will send an object where the key is the error and some error message. So let's create the login API that receives the email and password and returns the HTTP status of 200 and an object with and user and a success message. So since the name of our application is app, API will receive the data using the post method. So app.post, and we know that in this post we have two main arguments. The first argument is the root, and we will assume that the root is login. So the login form must have this. The second argument is our anonymous async function, async, and this function has two arguments, the request object and the response object, so arrow operator, and we have a curly braces here, and inside this let's have a try catch block. So inside the try block I will receive the email and the password. So let me make one variable email. This is my server variable. In this I will store the email that I have received from the body of the request. So request, from the request we access the body, and inside the body we are getting the email. So this gives us the email, and I'll create one more variable for the password, request dot body dot password. So we have received these two values, and now first we will check whether the user with this email exists or not. So I will create one, let's say, object. I'll call it user, and I will try to whether there exists some user with this email and password or not. If the user exists, then I will assign that user details to this user object. Okay, so here say await, and I will, to access the data from the user infos, we know that we cannot directly access the collections. We have to write the model name, and our model name is user model, and I need to find one record for a given email. So for this we have a method find one, and inside this I will create an object where key is the name of the field in the collection user infos. So the key is email. We can see here that the collection has field email, okay, and password also. So this email is the field name, then colon, and then the email that we have received from the client, the email which this API has received, right? So this email. Okay, so let's say if there is no user, that means this user object will not be created. If not user, then what to do? Then we will respond, let's say status. So status value put like 400, that means some server error, dot, and then send, and then I will create an object. Let me make one, sorry, and this object, let's say the key is error, and the value is the message, let's say user not found. So this status 500 server error, and this object with key error and the message user not found will be returned to the client. Okay, so the control will come to this line only if the user exists, right? So we are assuming the user exists, because if the user does not exist, then this line will take the control back to the client and your API will end. Okay, so assuming that user exists, then we go to this line, and here I will try to match the password which has been received by this API with the hashed password which is stored inside the collection. So here let me make one new variable. Let's say password match. So if the password matches, we will assign it to true value, otherwise we'll assign a false value. So password match equal to, and then we will use the bcrypt, and bcrypt dot, it has a method called bcrypt compare, and inside this the password which you have received from the client, and the second one is the password which this user which we have found, okay, his password, right? User dot password, right? Okay, so if the password, if the user also exists and if the password also matches, then the password match will get a true value. So we'll just check here. If not, that means if password match is not true, that means if the password is not correct, in that case again I will send the message back to the client response dot. So for authentication error, the status is 400401 and dot send. So again I will create an object here. Let's say here the key is error, and message I can say that authentication failure or password failure, or password incorrect. Authentication failure, this primarily means here that password did not match. Okay, now if the user doesn't exist, this line will end our API and control will go back to the client. If the password doesn't match, this line will end the API and the control will go back to the client. So the control will reach here only if the user exists and the password is correct. Okay, so in this case I will just send the response, send the user and the response back. So let's say my response is response dot. So for the success, for success there is only one value, 200. For failure there are many different reasons for failures and different values. For success only 200 is the value. Success dot status, and then I will attach one more method here, send. Inside this I will create an object, and the first of key here, the key is the user and the value is the user object that was created here. Okay, so this value refers to the user object, and the second key is the message, and the value here is, let's say, success. So if there is a need to use, we can use this message, or we can use this user, or the value of the status. So it totally depends on the client what will be used, right? And the catch error. So if because of any reason, if the user is there, if the password is there, but maybe because of some other reason, if this this attempt to get the username and password fails, then control will come to the catch block, and then we can write here console.log to see the reason for the failure in the console. So this is our login API, and let me send the control back here also. Response dot status, let's say 200, send message failed to connect to server. So just remember, whenever you have to use the APIs, we must know the name of the API. What is the name of the API? What is the method? What values will be received by the API, right? And what value will be returned by the API if the operation is successful, and what value will be returned by the API if the operation is failure, right? So we have made the API here. Now let's check our login API. So for this, again, we can go to our Thunder client. In Thunder client, let me make a new request here. And if you see my login API, the method is post. So here, first I will choose the method post, and then my URL. We know that our URL is http:// we are working on localhost right now, localhost. And as you know, in the index.js, we specified that the app will listen to the port number 3001, right? So here the port 3001, and after this the API, if you see, the root is /login. So it's a good idea, you can just copy from here and just paste it here, right? So no chances of making spelling mistakes. And then since it is a post request, so we have to, the information, the email and the password will go as a part of the body of the message, right? So you click here, body, and two things we have to send, right? So I'll make a JSON object here. The first element is email, so it must be in double quotes, right? And let's say the email is jabber@yahoo.com. So we already made a user with this account, right? Let me check here. Yeah, so email jabber@yahoo.com, and if I remember, the password I gave was password. So this is my body, and this is the information that will go to the API, right? Okay, now let me click here, send. Yeah, so we mentioned in the index.js that if this API is successful, then it will return the status 200, and it will return the object. You can see this object, right? The first key is the user and second key is the message. The user will have the user object and the message will have the value success, right? So just see this here. So the first, the user here, right? And the value is the user object. Second key is the message and the value is success here, right? And you can see here the status code, which we returned 200. Okay, right? So the query was successful. So our API is successful and we can use it in our application. So let me check with some value for some where the username is incorrect. So let's say Jabber1. So there is no user with Jabber1 in the database. So if I run this query, so obviously my user will not exist because user object will not be created because user does not exist, right? So you can see here, error, user not found. So this is the error message that we send if the user does not exist. So you can see in your index.js here, okay, we are trying to find the user with a given email. If the email is not there, then this user will not be created. So if not user, this condition will be true and it will return the status 500 and return the error with message user not found. So you can see this error user not found here inside the request, error user not found, and the status returned 500. You can see here, right? We can check the second case. If the user is correct but if the password is wrong, in that case the return message is return status is 401 and error is authentication failed, right? So our API is working.